by sordid associations with criminal exploitation and wasted lives. Some blame LSD for glamorizing drug taking, paving the way for today's more deadly addictions.
Heroin? I don't know what all this fuss is about. I could handle it.
Okay, so I do heroin a bit now. But I can control it. I could stop. If I wanted to.
There's no way I'm going to become an addict. I just do heroin.
It's no problem.
Look, I've got this thing under control. Just got to touch a flute a day.
Everyone thinks they can control heroin until it starts to control them.
I could give up tomorrow, couldn't I?
We've got to make a distinction between heroin, which is a drug which creates physical dependence, and LSD, which is a drug which has no physical dependence. And I don't believe you can make a link between the use of LSD in the 1960s and 1970s with the use of heroin and other drugs like that in the 1980s. In the 1960s and 70s, people were using drugs like LSD believing that it was a means of gaining greater self-awareness, greater insight into their own being. In the 1980s, people are using drugs like LSD as a means of escaping reality, of avoiding the unpleasantness of life. Of course, in a sense, it doesn't really matter what reasons people have for using it. What does matter is that LSD is an extraordinarily powerful drug whose effects we can't really control, and we can't control when we take it. It creates so many risks for both those who use it and for society generally that I believe we've got no choice but to retain legal controls on its use.
Aldous Huxley, whose early experiments with mescaline influenced popular interest in LSD, never lost faith in the value of psychedelic drugs. On the day he died from cancer in 1963, Huxley asked his second wife, Laura, to inject him with LSD.
It was the same day that President Kennedy was assassinated. And we were right here in this room. It was then his room, and he was getting very weak. And he said to me, "Give me a big, big piece of paper." And he wrote intramuscular, 100 microgram of LSD intramuscular. And I filled the syringe with it, and I gave it to him. It was very quiet. At a certain point I said, "If you hear me, squeeze my hand," and he did, very weakly. Then I thought, I had the impression that maybe it was necessary to give a second shot, and I asked him, he indicated. So I gave him a second shot, and that, well, then it was about 4 or 5 hours where there was absolutely no jolt, no agitation, nothing, except this very, very quiet, like a music that becomes less and less audible, like fading away. There was no jolt when he died. It was just that breath stopped, and there was a beautiful expression in the face. There was a very beautiful expression in the face.
When Huxley died in 1963, LSD was already beginning its descent into notoriety, and the advocates of Albert Hofmann's discovery were claiming for it the status of a religious sacrament.
I think that many of the intellectuals of the 60s were really failed priests. There are people who are looking for a priestly role in society, and in another age they would perhaps have joined a church and subjected themselves to the discipline of a church. But they, of course, didn't have the necessary transcendental belief or the necessary